in the introduction slide too.
Hamza, oh yeah, we all went to the group, right? Yeah.
Last week?
Last week, when the GitHub was there.
Oh yeah, was she? Oh yeah, I remember.
Hi, how are you? I have your question, so I just figured my backpack for today. I don't know. I still think I just I don't know why. I feel like I
When the chat.
feel a little bit, yeah, me Oh, oh, yeah. Oh, wait, are you talking about Yes, there should be. Oh, yes, Let me know if I'll talk to you.
Hey everyone, please get seated. We're going to start now. Thank you so much for coming here, everyone. I know it's cold and rainy outside. At the end, we have some Taco Bell for everyone. So, before we start with the chat, let me introduce you to Pathway. So, let's keep it simple. Pathway is a platform that makes your data faster and smarter. So, imagine superpowering some of your projects so that it takes real-time data and works fast with the change of pace and works super fast with any of the projects it is. Now, what makes Pathway special? It is designed to work with advanced AI models such as ChatGPT, and combined with a retrieval augmented system, it gives super accurate data to everyone. Now, you see apps like chatbots everywhere, personalized search engines, and also all of your favorite apps have this recommendation system that works on LLMs. So, as a student, as you see, AI is not just a trend, it is more essential to everyone. So, Learning Pathway gives you a front row seat to these innovations. Okay, let's move on to something that we did. GDSE and Pathway is collabing for something called the project submission competition. This competition is super simple. All you have to do is use Pathway's resources and make a project which is innovative and creative, and you can win a $25 gift card for your submission. On top of that, we have a lot of additional benefits where you get some free merch for your participation on this competition, and you get a verified project which you can put on your LinkedIn, on your resume. Having LLM models and RAG models as something you've worked on is something people really look at when they look at jobs for AI. And on top of that, you'll be featured on Pathway's official blog as all the projects you've worked on. So when it comes to AI and LLM models, it's like not everyone's worked with it. Some of us don't even know what it is. So we have a lot of resources that we're providing. The first one is an online bootcamp. It's just a public URL and a lot of information starting from the basics of LLM and RAG models, and also as a few projects with Pathways technologies that they've made that you can walk through before you start on your project. On top of that, we have people ready to help you in Pathways Discord server. So if you run into any issues, you can directly go to the server and ask. And if you start working right now, like during this weekend, you get a chance. We have this hands-on development session, which is happening exactly next weekend from 6 to 7 p.m. That you can come. If you have any problems or don't know where to start, you can come to this event to ask questions. We've made this super simple for everyone to work on projects, and you can win a lot of important stuff by just participating and submitting a project. Okay, let's move on to our main event. I'm going to first introduce Victor, who is the board advisor of Pathway, Human Longevity Inc., and the CEO chairman of Yeti Data. Yeah. And then we have Sanika and Samar to start with the fireside chat as well after the introduction.
Hi there. Let's see if we can do this without a microphone. My keys are kind of bad. So a little bit about me. I started off just like you guys are, engineering student. I'm not going to say how long ago, but a little while ago from the Midwest. I was biomedical. I couldn't make up my mind on whether I wanted to be a doctor or a engineer. And so I kind of like shot right in the middle. My roommate was the same way. He became a doctor, I became an engineer. Also the kind of person that had to pay for my own way through school, and the kind of job prospects when I was when I was a year away from graduation, basically shifted away from biomedical. So I had to literally switch to electrical at the last minute, which was a little bit of a scramble, and it turned out great. And then I was a co-op student for a company called Kohler. They make electrical generators in addition to the toilets and all that other stuff. And then so I spent my time engineering there for a couple years as a co-op student, and figured out I was much more on the social side of engineering, and ended up in sales and marketing. And I ended up here in the Bay Area. I worked in the semiconductor industry, starting in the 80s, and when Silicon Valley was about silicon. Worked for Sun, was part of the group that started the semiconductor team at Sun, and we turned that into a $500 million company. I did my MBA at Berkeley. I was working at Sun at the time. Got an offer to work for McKinsey in Central Europe, so I was part of the team that opened up that office over there. Then I came back, did actually my first AI company. It was a spin out of SRI Labs called Utopia, and we back then cutting edge AI was human to human speech recognition. So we have a couple of patents and everything else along those lines. Had kids, needed something a little bit more stable. Became an executive for a large German software company called SAP. Did a few things in my career at SAP, including basically starting and then managing and growing the data business. So we took that from a couple $100 million to about $500 million. Then I started my own company called Yeti Data, and we honestly did okay, only. We were a little early, so we were literally the world's first CDP, it's now called, but it was the customer data platform. And basically, when I managed the data business at SAP, we had all of this commercial data kind of coming in for these large B2B companies, call it an auto company, and there was data coming in on people from their website, and data coming in from people from dealer networks, and from service requests, and financing, and all that other stuff. And nobody had a unified view of the consumer, so we decided to give that to them. When a business is a little bit too early for a product, it turns out you do a lot of services. That's what we ended up doing, is a lot of services. The way we assembled our data model, we called it snowflaking. Thankfully, we trademarked it. A gigantic company called Snowflake stepped right on our trademark, and we ended up getting a lot of money for our intellectual property, so our investors did fine, whatever. And then since finishing that up, I've been looking for my next company to buy, thing to do, thing to work on. Been helping out companies as a board advisor, both on the tech and on the non-tech side. I had a lot of fun working with a guy called Craig Venter, who was the guy who decoded the human genome, and he started a company called Human Longevity. And I'm like, ooh, health data, longevity data is really kind of a data problem in disguise. So I've been working on that. And then I started working with Pathway, and they were just a little bit different. And they were just a little bit deeper and a little bit smarter and a little bit more traction with customers and everything else. And I've been increasingly spending more and more of my time with Pathway. I actually just joined their board last week. So that's kind of a new thing. We haven't announced any of that stuff. And then Pathway is on this like crazy growth curve. We just took in a whole bunch of money. Last week, our investors are actually trying to get us to take in more money. And by the end of the first quarter. And so it's kind of been a really crazy, hectic ride, but super fun. And so that's what you would read if you were kind of reading my LinkedIn, right? If you know me as a person, I would say I'm one of the more curious people that you've met. I kind of need to figure out how things work. That engineering brain inside of my head almost like needs to kind of create a template or like a methodology for something to work, and then once I got that thing to work inside my head, it works. The other thing is I'm a much more of a like an extrovert and social person relative to a lot of the other engineers that I work with. But that is like who I am in my personal life. When I work, I actually get a lot of energy working on really smart things with smart solutions. So that's kind of a little bit about me. And I got your list of questions. Thank you very much for not making me go very deep technically into the product itself, because that presentation would probably get a C- with a smart audience like you guys. That's it. Oh, sure, absolutely. Where do you want me to sit? Go to the house. Yeah, the biggest chair possible. Right.
Perfect. So let's start with a couple of quick questions. My name is Samar Khanna. I'm currently a second year student studying computer science and data management. And
Nice to meet you.
nice to meet you too. So let's get started. So we've been involved with a lot of companies constantly pushing boundaries, And so one question we had is how can young students like ourselves discover these opportunities and pursue these new careers?
Like pushing boundaries. It's kind of weird. There's two ways to kind of push boundaries, right? One, because you're out of options, and another one is you've earned your way to create a lot of options. So I mean, let's kind of kind of talk about both a little bit. When I speak with like my friends' kids, and they're like, "Oh, you're you're a Berkeley guy, and I want to go and solve world." Talk about that before we start going on this path. And so, therefore, I want to do a startup nonprofit to solve world hunger, whatever. And I look at it and I go, the last thing the world needs you to do is to do a startup to solve world hunger. There's a lot of really darn good companies right now that are working on it, and they need really smart people that are really good at something. Like really, really good at something. So my very first piece of advice is how do you break through into working on this cutting edge stuff is just get known for being really darn good at one thing. Like I mean really good, like you will quote your name that they're, oh my God, this person is really, really good at that. So that's path A. Path B is you're a little bit of a screw up, a little bit lost, like I was when I was kind of finding my way, and you kind of go for anything and everything that's given to you, and you just work harder at it than anybody else. Those are your two paths. Both have to do with work. It's kind of like Steve Jobs had a really famous quote, and he said, a good fisherman, when he's not fishing, he's fixing his nets, right? So he's always in his mind a fisherman. So figure out what it is that you do, your way to catch fish, and then do that. That's how it goes.
Thank you so much for that. I think the thing that always comes to me is just communicate to and I guess I'm sure everyone here does their best. What I wanted to kind of touch on is we talked about with getting data and marketing, how we need to talk about the business side.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people here, and I know a lot of people have business as well, if they want to found startups.
Yeah.
And as that CS students, most of us are CS teachers, or really computers, and we focus on the tech side. What are some advice you have just towards the business side?
First, got to give you a map.
I'm Sonica.
Sonica.
And I'm with the Apollo.
Very nice to meet you. So what I talk about here is a little bit of a press play talk track. And if a tree falls in a forest and there's nobody around to hear it, it doesn't make sense. So the reason I use that as a template for this discussion is if you create a really darn good, amazing product and nobody is using it, it's a science experiment. That's it. Let's not kid yourself. So the business side is how you monetize the really awesome innovations that are kind of out there. Or they're just kind of science experiments, right? And so, my advice here is very similar to what the founder of NVIDIA, Jensen, will tell you. It is, he was looking at the intersection of super high technology and super high volume. Right? And he literally made something as unsexy as making super cool chips for video games. is how NVIDIA. And he's like, I know a lot of gamers, they're gonna spend a lot of money on this stuff, so I could actually make some really, really cool technology things, and I know we'll do it. So volume and you know, figure out what the market is.
So another question we had, a lot of us are transitioning and are thinking a lot more about our careers in college. Do you have any lessons you picked up early in your career that tech students especially should keep in mind?
I think you can engineer your career. It's kind of a weird way to say it, especially when you start thinking of life as an engineer, which is a builder of stuff. There's a couple really, really important like career terms if you want to kind of go up the career ladder in a traditional sense. If you want to start your own company, then you got to skip all that. And then you got to find people that will kind of work their way, right? Because some people will have 20 years of experience in their career, and some people will have 1 year experience 20 times, right? You're literally groundhogging with people. And the very first kind of career engineering thing that you gotta think about it is like master of one. And the very first thing you gotta do is kind of master yourself, right? Can you wake up in the morning? Can you run a calendar for yourself? Can you schedule stuff that is, important and not urgent and get it in your schedule? I'm assuming everybody here has done that part of that trajectory actually pretty well, right? Now that next turn in your career, if you think about it, doing a switchback going up a mountain biking trail, which I love, is about mastery of a skill. And that was back to my first piece of advice about getting good at something. Now, the great part and the great news for your generation is that it is actually really, or let's say, relatively easier to become known for something and get your name out, right? I mean, if you were an engineer, when I graduated, you would toil away at some heavy-duty project with another couple hundred of engineers as part of a mass of people, and nobody might even see the project that you worked on. You might be working on a part of a turbine in some thing, in some kind of a jet engine or something like that no one will actually even see. These days, there's all of these great ways, like if you're a data scientist, that you can go out and get a package score, you can go and compete inside of different forums and get your name going for things like that. You could actually figure out how to create AI engine to make better underwater basket use, which is kind of a crazy term that was used back then for like a really corner case skill. But if you are the best person creating AI for underwater basket weaving, you're going to get known.
I don't really talk about this question.
No, that's totally fine.
Because we talk so much about finding a niche, finding a niche. What would be your approach to in giving that kind of niche, finding a niche, finding which specific part?
Well, I think you have to be authentic, right? You have to kind of find something that speaks to you. Because if you're going to be spending a lot of time working on it, it's going to be a really sucky path if you hate it, right? So you got to kind of find something that is authentic to you and that speaks to you. And I would almost like think about, imagine the world that you would want it to be, and see where a lot of those gaps are. and see how your skill set can kind of help with that. It's very easy to interview students for how well they code. Super easy, right? You can write a chatbot practically and interview them and stuff like that. When you interview for a job and you have a very interesting point of view about something, I am interested. I'm interested in how you're thinking. I'm interested in how you, even if you're wrong, how you settled in on something, because like the recognition of that passion is what I'm looking
So much. Moving back to what you talked about.
That's-
So you, okay, well, how is working at companies like Microsoft, SAP, or Microsystems, how do they influence the way that you as a leader or as a member of your approach?
I don't have a good canned answer for this. I think that the one thing that the very big companies like Sun or Microsoft or an SAP is they need to do things at scale. Right? If you're a $10 billion company and your stock price, half of it is based on a 20% growth rate year over year, you got to find $2 billion of new business every year until you hit 20, and then you got to find $4 billion worth of business kind of every year, right? And so they are really good at finding those big chunks of money to go after, right? I would say the job of startups is not to go after the same chunks of money in the same way with the same buyers and everything else. But I will talk about this, is the people that I would say, like the advice for startups that I always give them is, don't fall in love with your solution. Fall in love with the customer's problem. They're the ones that are going to give you the money. They're the ones that are going to give you the risk of going with it. They're the ones, and you know, a lot of techie kind of startups and stuff like that go nowhere. They call it the vitamin versus Vicodin problem. You know, a vitamin might make you 3% healthier over the long run. But if I've got a freaking toothache to the point where I can't think, I am gonna give you anything I have to make that toothache go away. So if you've got a Vicodin in your pocket, I am paying big bucks for that. And it's shocking, but the problems are kind of perennial, right? Like, how do I find more customers? How do I get the customers to like me more? How do I get my product assembled in the right amount of time? How do I lower my financial risk and all that other stuff? So those problems are literally perennial. How they're being solved and what technologies they're using is always changing.
So thinking about things at scale and staying adaptive to customers.
Yes.
So
Focus on the problem instead of the solution.
okay.
Just, anyway, you're always listening. Any startup pitch that you read, whatever, blah blah blah, problem, this, whatever, and then the solution is always or whatever company you are.
Another question. So with the use of a lot of these GenAI tools, they are increasing productivity for a lot of things and are changing a lot of business. So with your experience, do you have an idea of where you can see the future of GenAI going?
You know, I think Gen AI is actually going to go when you think about it as a volume problem, X times Y times Z, I would say number one is Gen AI. Gen AI is actually going to get smarter in its solution. Right now, it's actually pretty dumb, right? Working with Gen AI is a little bit like Groundhog Day. And so let's say Gen AI is as smart as a PhD on the first day of interviews. You work with it for a week, guess what? It is still as smart as the first day of a PhD student. And if you work for it for 5 years, it's still just as smart as the first day. So it's a little bit of a groundhog problem. So I actually think that one of those main places is that Gen AI is actually just going to go much, right? It's going to start learning and be a Big 2 student and a Big 10 student and a Year 2 student and stuff like that. The second thing, I think it's actually going to be as cheaper. Like right now, if you take a look at all the money that is going into the world of Gen AI, from the provider point of view, a lot of that money is just being burnt on CPU or GPU clock cycles, right? For training models and for data and stuff like that. I don't know the exact math at this second, but when I first kind of formulated it inside my head, let's take a look at a common use case where people think that Gen AI could be good, and I agree with it, is search. So Google has basically figured out how to make about 35 cents per search. Of that, they make 17 cents a profit. So that means they spend about 18 cents on getting it, right? They have these buildings, and they have really smart people, and super nice cafeterias, and that feature. They also have data centers and GPUs, and so out of their 18 cents, about half kind of goes on the hardware-ish kind of a thing, and the rest of it is software. By software, I mean people. In the world of Gen AI, inference is actually a hell of a lot more expensive than 35 cents, right? That's where it figures 60 or whatever. I would also bet that the amount of revenue generated for inferences right now is 10 cents. It's a lot of money being poured onto that inferno, which VCs are happy to pay. And that is going to be driving the cost of way. Right. And then there's other things, and the third, the X, Y, and Z thing is it's going to become a lot more useful for a fragmented set of things, right? So all of a sudden, it is super useful to create, or funny to create a picture of a flying chicken, right? Wearing a toupee, but all of a sudden it would be a hell of a lot more useful if you could actually create a really good picture of this new molecule that you're building in chemistry class and how you show people how that works. So somebody's going to do that. So it's going to get fragmented, and then as it gets fragmented, it's actually going to go much more valuable. Those are excellent. Yeah, and they may be old, but they're directionally good.
Now you're even one of the advisors. You've been all the advisors for research now.
Maybe 1,000.
Oh, okay. So there we go. That leads even better into my question. How does someone like us approach something like you?
With a very specific ask. So asking me to become a board advisor is invariably the fastest way to get to an outcome. Right, but if you sit there and say, hey, listen, we have a startup and we are working on this very specific problem, and I need help with this specific thing, and you are that person that came up in my mind to do this, that is the fastest way to get traction. So I'll give you an example of my journey with Pathway. So Susanna called me up. I sit on the board of their main investor. So when it's a bunch of Central European companies, and when they get big enough to move over here, their investors usually give it. Are they spending their money the right way? Are they thinking about the market situation and all that other stuff? And then the original name of Pathway was Naval. So Susanna has a PhD in maritime logistics, and basically what happened is she worked with the top CEOs of maritime logistics companies, and they all said, we would really love an Uber-like experience for our boxes. When is that box coming, and what is what's blocking that one box from getting delivered or whatever? And her husband, who was also a co-founder of Pathway, basically said, well, their data structure is killing them. We have to kind of redesign everything from scratch. They were a logistics software-ish kind of a house. And I think logistics is fascinating, super important. Also, the slowest moving market on the planet. People change software in the logistics industry like maybe every 20 years. And there's maybe like 50 buyers, so there might be 1 or 2 deals a year. Just doing my math, average of 2.5 deals a year. And I said, and then she called me up in a panic that she's running out of money, and I go, well, listen, no money is actually going to replace software at this point, because for the second time in my career, I've seen people getting fired in positions of leadership inside of the companies for not doing something. Usually people get fired for doing something wrong. They spend money on some project and it goes way over budget, and you need a reason, and you need somebody to blame, so somebody gets fired. So the CIOs are usually relatively risk averse, even though they control the levers for a lot of productivity inside the company and stuff like that. But if you're a CIO and you have no AI strategy, and you go present that to the board, your ass is going to be fired. And so, and I can't remember the genesis of the question you might have to ask me. The advisor track, and so just be specific. And then so all of a sudden, Susanna calls me up and she's like, listen, here's what happened. We ended up creating the framework. Our customer adoption is, we've got really great customers, but we just have a few. And I'm like, I'm so shocked. And but she goes, but we put the framework up on GitHub and it's getting tons and tons of stars, and so it's kind of doing great. And then I go, oh, are any of these use cases? Yeah. And she's like, oh my God, that's our fastest growing use case. Why aren't you telling the world about it? And then as soon as their investors figured out that they're actually an AI infrastructure company in disguise, then and then so that was a very specific kind of an ask, and that one was super tight. It's still to me. That's how I do it.
Knowing that companies are probably moving a way to be intensive way to describe it.
Many things.
We have one more great question. Asking for a friend, how can I get a job as a
So thank you for that. I knew it was coming. I'm gonna actually go back to what I originally talked about. Is show us that you're good at something that matters to us. And the great news is you can kind of prove it. Like cool projects, some cool Kaggle score for data science, or something that speaks to the fact that you're good at something. Because if you're not good at something and you're a generalist, you would hate life at pathway and we would probably have a hard time. Right? And I would actually also give a little bit more of a scenario here. There's generally about 3 different phases in your career. You can go back and finish up with different pathways and stuff like that. But there's the part where you're kind of learning, right? The company is investing in you at that point, right? Then there's the middle part of your career where the company is getting way more out of you than they think, right? And if you're not smart about it, you're kind of, you can get yourself in a position of trading time for money. And one of those other pieces of career advice that I love to give is if you don't feel yourself learning, get scared and keep looking for something that is going to keep you learning. Nobody really talks about it, but the world of tech is the only industry that I know that has figured out how to make money and is deflationary. So a chip that cost $100 2 years ago might cost $10 a year ago and might cost $1 today. A Google search, what was in a Google search was very minimal 5 years ago, and what you get out of a Google search now is enormous. You don't see it, but you don't actually have to, if you're trying to do an expense report and you're translating exchange rates or something like that, you can literally just plug into Google now, hey, listen, how many, 42 pounds, how much is that dollars? You don't have to call up, find an agent and click in there and translate this and all that, it does it right away. So Google actually gives you a lot more for the same thing. And I want to finish up the last thing about kind of career. We spent a little bit about this thing, was about in your shoes, like here are those first kind of navigating those first turns. There was also other questions in there later, but the next turn is the hardest, and maybe the least rewarding for techies, and that is the mastery of team. Remember I said mastery of self, mastery of skill. The next one is mastery of team, right? In this complex world that we live in, we can't get really a lot of stuff done ourselves, right? And I would say, the one thing that can actually make you kind of stand out or at least working along that path is show that you work on a group project that, hey, this is what you do. Yeah. But then, the next one is mastery of team. And then is the question of how far you want to take it. A lot of people don't even want to be a manager. Then after that, it's mastery of the internal company, and that's the general manager. That's the most rewarding for most people if they choose to go that far. And then sadly, the job of the CEO is actually mastery of the excellence, where most CEOs spend at least half their time working with customers and not in the office. So they agree that their team that they have working the company inside
is so damn good that we can start the press, the analysts, all that. Those kind of are, that's your climbing wall that we're good.
Thank you so much for doing
Oh.
sharing some of this with us. We're gonna take a quick moment, maybe break, for you guys to have some food. And then
Well, there's taco bells.
there is some it's just behind those doors. And then if you have any questions, maybe we can take it after.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh my God, thank you so much. Oh, wow. Thank you very much. Of course.
Thank you so much. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah. I want to catch the buzz.
Evan, take a photo after you're done. Evan, you're take photos. We're gonna take the photo.
I was looking at this video like an hour ago. It just happened.
I actually want to ask you, I didn't know.
Take a picture of your wonderful people president. Oh, you should have talked to him. I should have talked to him. But I was really fucking like talking to him. I can't hit him with phone, bro. It's too crazy. Oh, really? No. That's fucking crazy. That's crazy.
So even though
Oh my
it's
god,
kind of
GG. It's over for you. It's over for you.